Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Highland-Shepley, class of '86, and I'm here to introduce one of the KCSS CASA distinction recipients, Dr. Robert Sargeant. I want to start my introduction with a quote, and the quote is by Donald Walsh, and it goes like this: "Life begins at the end of your comfort zone." So very similar. And we'll get back to that quote in a minute. I went to school here at KCSS, and I went to school with Rob, and I remember Rob as being, intelligent and a very studious person who excelled in academics. I sat behind him in computer science class, and often I'd tap him on the shoulder when I had a question, and he'd like, "Oh yeah, it's just what, and he was always so happy to help. But if I think about Rob back then, he was a little small in stature, so although he excelled in academics, he maybe wasn't the type of person that you'd describe as an athlete. So, and I'll get back to that in a minute. So, after high school, we went our respective ways off to university, and Rob found his passion in biochemistry. And he went on to complete a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry, a master's degree, and a PhD. And then Rob didn't stop there. He went on to do a medical degree and became a specialist in internal medicine, and currently practices at St. Mike's Hospital in Toronto. He has also become a medical teacher at St. Mike's and has won several awards for his teaching abilities. And somewhere in that time, he found the love of his life and got married and had a couple of kids. How he does all this, I don't know. Anyway, so meanwhile, at this time, I completed university where I met my future husband, and he has been the Canadian National Olympic Triathlon team coach. He's coached Olympic gold medalist by the name of Simon Whitfield, and he also coaches various high-level Ironman athletes. So one day my husband came home and he said that he was coaching a former high school classmate of mine to do an Ironman. And I was puzzled. I kind of thought, well, I've kept in touch with a lot of my high school friends, and I didn't know anyone that was doing triathlons at that time. And so he said, well, it's Rob Sargeant. And I went, really? Rob Sargeant? Well, and because the Rob Sargeant that I knew from high school wasn't the Rob Sargeant, well, he wasn't the type of guy that I thought would do an Ironman. So at this same time, he was just finishing his PhD, and there was a party, thrown in his honor, and so my husband and I were invited, and I think a couple of the teachers were invited as well. And I was really curious to see this new version of Rob Sargeant. And so, when I went to the party, I was amazed. He was a lot taller, and he, would fit the bill as an Ironman athlete. He looked quite the athlete. So, let's see. And so then Rob went on to complete 5 Ironmans and at least 20 half Ironmans, which brings me back to my quote: life begins at the end of your comfort zone. For those of you that don't know what an Ironman is, it's a triathlon, which is, a race where you swim and then you bike and then you run. And doing a triathlon, as you can imagine, is pretty tough. But an Ironman is just crazy. It's a race that consists of swimming 3.8 kilometers, then cycling 180 kilometers, and then finishing off with a marathon, 42.2 kilometers. Yeah. So what impresses me most about Rob is not that he has a PhD, not that he's a medical doctor, and that's obviously, part of why he's being inducted here today. But when I think back to the Rob that I knew at KCSS, academics were in his wheelhouse, but athletics were not. He pushed outside his comfort zone to pursue excellence in a sport, and not just any sport. He chose to train for Ironman triathlons. So finally, it humbles me to introduce one of the 2015 KCSS CASA distinction recipients who is a husband, a father, a teacher, a doctor, and an athlete, Dr. Rob Sargeant.
I'm back in high school. The first thing I do is get rid of my gum. I don't know if that's still a priority these days, but thank you so very, very much for this. I had the same opportunity yesterday to come back to King after 30 years in my case, to walk these halls again to talk to students, and it did bring back a flood of memories. I don't have anything real specific to tell you today, so what I thought I would do is try to link this all together, thank you, with a common theme. And it's what I wrote in the little blurb that's going to go next to my photograph, and that in the case of distinction, and that is that we're all learners, and we all learn in different ways and at different rates. When I think back at King to my time at King City, I actually didn't see myself as a particularly good student. I was okay. I knew enough to kind of work to that 80.0 average to just get over the line, and that's what I got most years. It was 80.0 or 80.1. I think I was fairly studious, and I worked hard. But I didn't kind of see myself as a standout, and I don't know that, to be pretty honest with you, I don't know that I really enjoyed a lot of it. A lot of it was kind of homework and things that you had to do and kind of a process you had to get through. And as Karen rightly mentioned, I wasn't a great athlete. I certainly didn't play any team sports. I didn't play hockey like my brother did or anything of that nature. And so I kind of bumped along. And the other thing you remember as well is all the insecurities come back to you that afflicted us all as teenagers at those times in our lives. And you wonder, and remembering, what am I going to be, and how am I perceived by my peers, and what is this all going to mean? So I went through high school and came out the other end with a real passion, I think, interest, would be more of the word, in science. And I'm going to talk a little bit how that was fostered here, as you can see in a second. Went on to university without yet, I think, even coming close to hitting my stride as a learner. And yeah, I've gotten all these degrees, and I'm in a position now where I'm very fortunate to be a professor and to practice medicine. But it was never a clear path, and it was never even that clear of a goal. It's something I kind of arrived at by pecking away and plugging away. And it was really my fourth year of my undergrad at U of T when I started to get passionate about what I was learning. And then I also discovered I was good at it. And those two things together started reinforcing this interest I had in biochemistry and science. I didn't become the learner that I think I still am as a lifelong learner and passionate about it until I was 22 years old. So 4 years after I left these hallways. That's not to say, and what I told the kids yesterday is that's going to be true for a lot of them too, and for similar things to what Joe has said as well. We find our passions in life at different times, we hit our strides at different times, and it's not something we all have to have figured out today. And I too, even now, continue to reinvent myself and take on new roles and responsibilities. So with that caveat, with that as the kind of theme, I hope, I'd like to talk a little bit about what King City did contribute to that process, and it contributed a lot. First of all, I had great teachers. Many of them who are here today. And a couple little anecdotes that I think illustrate this. I had Dr. Smarka as my grade 13 physics teacher. And I can remember at one point in time, not doing well on a test. I can't remember the context of what led to the after-class discussion. But I remember talking to him about something having to do with the class or something I screwed up on. I can't remember now what it was. And his comment to me was, Rob, or Robbie, that's what I call him, you're going to be okay because you work hard. So, and that's true, and that resonated. And that's kind of a mantra that I teach to my own students and to my own kids. there's no substitute for hard work and plugging away. And I'm sure he's never going to remember that conversation. He's had it probably a zillion times with a lot of people, but it's something I look back on fondly remember. Another thing I remember was from phys ed class, from gym, as we used to call it. I really sucked as an athlete. I was the guy who got picked last, right? You know, for flag football and that kind of thing. But I had teachers who acknowledged and rewarded effort and how well you improved, not how good you were. And one of the things that I remember most clearly, and just an absolute massive confidence booster for me, was around Terry Fox. You know, we're now 35 years into the Marathon of Hope, or whatever it's been. He's a hero of mine. And don't know why this is choking me up, but it kind of is. I remember Mr. Sargeant having us write an essay in gym class about what we thought about Terry Fox. And I don't know if you remember this, Ed, that you did this. And without acknowledging that I had written it, he read mine in front of the class. I thought that was pretty cool. It kind of reaffirmed that it was okay for me to be passionate about something, it was cool to be passionate about something, and to acknowledge this fantastic athleticism in this cancer survivor who was running across the country. And so when I did get around, many, many years later, to doing that Ironman, one of the things I thought about was actually my time in high school. Not like sticking it to anybody, but thinking, man, I just, like, the world's worst athlete with the lowest self-esteem around anything athletic just stumbled across the finish line with no toenails and made it. And, and my thoughts went back to Mr. Sargeant and Mr. Shvalovich and thinking, they'd probably be pretty proud of seeing me here doing this today. And likely, I'd be the last person they'd ever think that would have done it. But for them to come to mind in that moment, I think speaks to the mentorship that they had for me. Other great influences here at King City, Mr. Carson, of course, I had through a lot of the science classes. Who can forget his overhead projectors, slides, and all the rest of it, but passionate about what he taught and about science, and he instilled that in me as well. And Mr. Hill, who's not here today, I'd like to acknowledge. The last person I'd like to talk about, because I think it illustrates that the holistic nature of the breadth of our education we got here at King City is Peter Henderson, who has passed away. I blame your father. Many of us knew Peter. He was a great guy. And bear with me. Let me put it this way so I can gather my emotions. I was at the gym, Toronto Athletic Club downtown a number of years ago, and just checking in. There's squash there, and Peter plays squash. And from behind me I hear, "Hello, Robbie." And it's like, I guess they let anyone in here. It's like the fanciest club in the city. Like, what's a retired teacher doing here? I said, "Hello, Mr. Henderson." He said, "It's Peter now." And we got reacquainted, and we'd meet about once a month, play a game of squash. And as I'd gotten into medicine and he had some issues medically, I was able to kind of, help him through those periods of his life in parallel. And then ultimately, he passed, I guess, a few years ago now. And it was I think, that moment that reacquainted me with King City and with why I'm here today. Because at his funeral is where I saw many of my teachers. I got reacquainted with Mr. Sargeant and so forth. And I think it was a kind of a real positive thing to me, and kind of sad to have lost him, but a kind of uplifting moment in the same way to see my teachers and mentors back and having an opportunity for me to reacquaint with them. Why I bring up Peter is not because he was a great guy to play squash with and because he could tell his stories so well, even if they were repeated over and over. But he also taught me the importance of thinking beyond science. The importance of learning how to read and write and do it well, think critically. So what's not in my CV and what hasn't been talked about today is along the way I also picked up a major in political science because I had an interest in it and because of Peter's passion for history that he left with me as well. And I think it's important, it's been an important part of my life, and still is, to be able to think critically, to write well, to reason. And I think I owe a lot of that to Peter. So that, in a kind of roundabout, meandering kind of way, is my way of saying thank you to this day, telling you a little bit about me and a little bit how King City influenced me. There's a lot said about education, and there's a lot said about teachers, and about systems, and contracts, and all this kind of stuff. But I want my teachers to know they did really well by me. And now that I'm a teacher myself, I think that DNA that gets passed on is a reflection of your work. So thank you.